This is my 67, used to be a 67 MGB. It's, I think arguably now is a 2024 MGB if they made one. What's original to the car is most of the sheet metal. This emblem is original to the car. The trim is all original, although it's all been powder-coated gloss black to give it a more contemporary look. The glass is all original to the car. The suspension and powertrain are all brand new. The engine is a crate engine from Ford Performance. The front and rear suspension are brand new from different race car suppliers. The transmission is a donor. It came from a 2016 Mustang, but it was rebuilt by Art Carr at California Performance Transmissions. It was completely torn apart and rebuilt with Kevlar clutches and a custom-built torque converter. So it's built up to racing spec. There were basically 4 parties involved in building the car. There was the fabricator who took the car up to paint. There was a painter who took the car and did all the final fitting of the body panels and so on. There was a restoration shop in Scottsdale who did the final assembly. And I taught myself to do the interior. I watched a whole lot of YouTube videos, bought myself a sewing machine, and spent a lot of evenings, weekdays, and weekends working on the interior. It was a lot of fun. There were so many times I was trying to get something done inside that car and I said, how the hell did they do this in the factory? When the car is coming by for like 15 minutes and they've got that much time to do that particular job. Having done some shopping on Bring a Trailer and watching past auctions on Bring a Trailer, I saw several of these V8 conversions go by on Bring a Trailer, and I thought they were pretty interesting. I always thought the MGB was a nice looking car. It was once said to be one of the top 25 designs by Pininfarina, by Road and Track magazine. So I thought, you know, this would be an interesting thing to try. And I parked the idea for a while. I came back to it when I saw this car pass on eBay. It had been sitting in a garage, a barn, since 1979, when I saw it in 2019. And it still had the original New Jersey inspection window sticker from 1979 in the windshield. And I remember that because I used to live in New Jersey. So I decided to bid on the car. I got the car, and I had a friend near where I live in Rio Verde who is a builder. He has several decades of experience building cars. He was mentored by Smokey Yunick way back. He built cars that ran on drag strips, road races, Bonneville, and Daytona. So this guy knows about building cars. And I talked to him about it. And I said, well, would it be interesting to put a V8 in this car? And he said, well, that's often done, but it depends on what you want to do with the car. If you just want to drive it around the street, fine. But if you want to try to take this car on a track at any point, that's not the best thing to do with one of these cars because it makes the car nose heavy. So I talked to him for a while, and that's how we got started. We came up with the idea of how to make it into a balanced driver, as well as a car that would be competent if taken out on a racetrack. The decision, well, we started with the idea of something like a V8 conversion, but everybody's doing V8 conversions, so let's try something different. And we came up with the idea of a Ford EcoBoost. I happen to have one. I have a 2016 Ford Escape with a EcoBoost engine in it. And it's a surprisingly good performer for even a car like that. So we thought about it and we said, well, that hasn't been done before, so why don't we try that? The decision to use the EcoBoost and install it in the correct position in the car, those two things combined led to a lot of fabrication work and sheet metal work, and that got complicated. And part of aside from using the EcoBoost, the next decision that was made was to keep all of the accessories on the engine, like the alternator, AC compressor, and turbo, in their original factory positions on the block. So that took a lot of fiddling to excavate a lot of the sheet metal and to modify the frame in the engine compartment to get all of that stuff to fit where it was supposed to be. But at the end of the day, it was done. So at this point, if anything goes wrong with the engine, all I've got to do is take it down to a Ford dealer and say, here.
Hitting off of your most recent answer, I would like to ask you what the biggest hurdle was. And it sounds like maybe the fabricating and excavating could be that.
I would point to two hurdles. One was the initial fabrication, because it led from one thing to the next thing to the next thing. And it's one of the reasons we wound up with putting a full roll cage in the car. The problem was that to get the engine to fit, there was a lot of sheet metal that was excavated from the engine compartment. And the frame was completely modified in the front of the car for that same reason. In order to stiffen the car and make the car tolerant of the higher torque of the new engine, we made the decision to put a full roll cage in the car. And the roll cage is tied into all of the suspension points as well as to the frame of the car itself. So it's basically a 3/4 monocoque with a 3-point rear axle. The second hurdle that we came up with was after we began assembly of the car after it was painted. The combination of the EcoBoost engine with the Ford 6R80 transmission, which is an automatic manual 6-speed, created some problems for the wiring harness because the motor came from Ford Performance. It's a crate engine, brand new engine. They don't provide a wiring harness that will run the automatic transmission. So it took a little bit of hunting to track down a supplier who provides the harness as well as the ECM for the engine. But we finally did. It took a few months to get that done. It was partially disassembled, sitting in the barn back in New Jersey. And the guy asked me, he said the engine is separate. Do you want me to put it in the car? And I said, no, forget it. We're not going that way with the car. So the experience when I got the car was pushing it into the garage, just shoving it into the garage. And after the car was done, the first reaction was, thank God it's done. It's finally done. The reaction I get at car shows, I've taken it frequently to a Cars and Coffee up in Scottsdale. And there's all kinds of, Ferraris and Porsches and Lamborghinis up there. And I park this thing in the parking lot, and people look at it and they go, that looks like an MG. And then they come walking over it, and then they look inside under the hood, and they see this EcoBoost engine. And I see people come, hey, they call their buddies over, hey, look at this. It really attracts a crowd. I've looked. There's a website that follows the MG experience, and they have a special section on the website for engine swaps. And there are people who try to do EcoBoost conversions, and they get into trouble because they don't have enough courage to do the kind of excavation work that we did on this car, and then put everything back so that it's a solid car when it's all done. The guy I worked with was basically fearless about sheet metal getting in his way or structural steel getting in his way. He had built so many cars that he knew it was possible, and he wasn't intimidated by anything that was in his way that came from the factory. My message to the next caretaker would be that our objective in building this car was to have a balanced street car and track car, and to have sufficient creature comforts in the car, like air conditioning, automatic transmission, power steering, power windows, that if the next owner wants to take it to the track, they can have fun. If their spouse wants to drive it during the week, it's a drivable car. You know, you're not going to have to be Arnold Schwarzenegger in order to drive this car around. You can drive it either with the automatic or manual transmission. It's a nice car to drive.